All right. Good morning, everyone. Today we are here with session 1 of creating a guaranteed and viable curriculum. It's part of a teacher clarity series. My name is Shauna Stefanchik from Step Up, and I'll introduce Val Montgomery, who is part of the team as well. You're going to see more of her as she continues to build our network and make it that much better. But today we wanted to share with you just some specific things. Our goal at our company is to always empower teachers with content knowledge so that they can get PD within the day and that we can bring some clarity of the teaching standards. And so why are we even talking about clarity today? And it is our belief at Step Up that we're actually, unfortunately, in the midst of an educational crisis, in that teacher retention is at an all-time low. We're having a really hard time keeping great people in the field. So our company has really been trying to think innovatively. So you'll see we're kind of being disruptors in some of the things that we propose to, but it's because we're trying to keep people in the field of education, and we feel that we need to rethink and redo some of the ways that we've typically done it. We have teacher workload is at an all-time high, so that's always in the back of our mind. How do we help that workload? We also realize that there has been this rise in untraditionally trained or certified educators. So as we're losing people, we're having to bring people in just to fill those seats. And so that's always in the back of our mind with things we propose. How do we help those people who may not have even been trained to be educators in the field have clarity of standards and understand what a guaranteed and viable curriculum is? And ultimately, too, is that we're constantly looking at the new priority standards, because we know that's how schools are going to be judged and assessed on that state assessment. So that these are some pillars of the why behind we're taking the approach we are, is these things are always circling our mind. How do we give you an approach that really hits the crisis that we're focusing on? So just a quick recap for those of you who weren't aware that there has been since 2021 this shift to priority standards. And so I've just taken a screenshot from DESE's website. I'm sure hopefully all schools are aware of these, but not all schools have taken the time to make sure that their teachers are aware of these and that they are clear for teachers. And so in all 4 core contents, K through 12, standards have been prioritized. So this is a really big deal because the state has then come out and said, hey, and by the way, 80% of your MAP and EOC assessments are going to be over these priority standards. So that's a huge why behind we need to be making sure that your guaranteed and viable curriculum, your pacing guides, are aligned to these new priority standards. A quick synopsis of in those: ELA, they've been prioritized, math has been prioritized, science, all of your standards were prioritized. Those were already aligned to NGSS, and they felt they were few in number. So you'll find all of those as a priority. And in social studies, the biggest shift with priority standards is that the state is moving away from content standards being memorized, and those are now your tools of inquiry, are your priority standards. So they very much mirror the thinking skills you would see in ELA, and it's shifting students away from memorizing facts and details to we're wanting them to be able to find information or draw conclusions to deduce the answers to those questions. So a little bit of a different skill set there. So step 1, if you haven't done it, make sure your teachers know what these priority standards are. You're printing those off and showing them. And then we're going to show you today how you could put those into a pacing guide. So what are the barriers to clarity? So what are the barriers to teachers truly understanding what their standards mean? So I've listed some things on here that we find commonly is this one, the lack of tightly aligned Missouri instructional tools. So for example, if you ask the teachers in your district, what is curriculum? What might they say? And something we hear often is they name a resource or a textbook. I would have done the same thing as a new teacher because I wasn't even clear in the fact that a guaranteed and viable curriculum, according to Marzano's definition, are those state standards. That's why Missouri adopted those. That's our promise to Missouri kids. And the equity piece we bring is we say, we're going to expose all kids to these standards because that's our guarantee to help them become college ready. That's a big barrier that we need to make sure teachers understand their standards are their curriculum. And that's our promise as educators. What happens though is we're not always prepared, especially have untraditional teachers of even knowing what those standards are. So if we walk into a classroom that has a textbook, that textbook becomes our curriculum. And we know textbooks are aligned to multiple states, even though they'll sell you an, oh, we're aligned to your state. So you have a teacher using this textbook to teach concepts. And then the state assessment comes along. Not that any of us have ever looked at over a student's shoulder and looked at that assessment. And then you might find, oh, I didn't ask it in that way, or I didn't approach it. And so we have this big misalignment in how teachers are teaching based on the resources they're using, and then based on the state's definition of that standard. So we want to make sure that at our organization, we're going to become very standard focused, and we always anchor people in those state documents to show you, but what does Missouri say proficiency is? What is the Missouri standard definition? And then we're going to be always help you try to organize that and help teachers have ownership of it. So one of the biggest barriers can just be this idea of misalignment that we need to do. So our company would suggest, how do we help? We want to give teachers a clear map of how to organize those priority standards. And to address that clarity gap, we want to give them Missouri specific tools that they can vet those resources. So we never at any time would say, don't give your teachers a resource. They need those. They need things to pull from, but we want to give them Missouri aligned tools to show them, but how are you a good consumer of that resource? Which lessons should you do? And how might you need to adjust it to Missouri standards? So step one in creating your guaranteed and viable curriculum is you have to have teachers identify this reckoning between their resource and a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And on the right-hand side is an example of a pacing guide that we would say would be a high quality and something to use, and that you're clear with your teachers. This one's read vertically. What is the unit? How long am I going to teach? But in that unit, what are my priorities? And then what are my supporting? Because what we're having them do is analyze their resource, what Missouri priority and supporting standards live in that resource. So we're helping them marry the two. If these are the big standards, so these would be the lessons within this resource that you're going to teach today. So it helps them be a better consumer. There are some lessons you don't have to teach out of that resource. We only need to teach the ones that go to these priority standards. A deeper look at this tool. We also recommend, as you're writing your guaranteed and viable curriculum, knowing that competency-based learning is coming down the pike, we would recommend to you creating a type of template that would also include these I can statements. Because one of the things that you're going to need, it's always good practice to write those I cans on the board and make sure kids are clear about their learning as well. That's series 3. We'll talk about student clarity and empowerment. But we want to make a pacing guide that really represents what should the teacher be doing. And then we can embed teacher scales or proficiency scales in here. And we're also building a system where we can embed student scales, because that's something we're going to need when we provide student clarity. So we don't, I'm kind of breezing through this, but just a pause to think about, is my current pacing guide, one, do we have one? Is it aligned to the pacing of our resource? Does it clearly help teachers see in every unit what is priority and what is supporting? And have I developed a system that also honors I can statements in the place where I could house student scales? Because I'm trying to help you build a tool that will be lasting, so we don't have to ask teachers to redo it in the next 2 or 3 years. Another close-up, again, here I've just said it's a roadmap for competency-based learning. In this one, the I cans are actually in pink, but you can see how we've also included supporting. standards as well. So again, teachers are able to see throughout the year at a glance, what are my big tickets I'm hitting? This will help us for series 2 when we talk about building assessments. This roadmap, if I've got 3 priority standards in unit 1, those are the 3 things I need to be providing an assessment over. And we also are big fans of using Google Sheets. You can see on the screenshot how you can keep multiple districts under one tab. And we recommend trying to build a type of landing page or one spot. One of the biggest barriers in education is that teachers come in and they don't know where their guaranteed viable curriculum is, or maybe you have one and then it's really hard to find or to navigate. So we found that Google Sheets is a really easy way that you can hyperlink everything. You can make tabs for multiple grade levels and really create this landing page or spot. We want every teacher, whether they've been trained or not, to come into the organization to know what they're supposed to be teaching, and it's really clear. That will help you with teacher retention, making sure they're clear on what they need to teach. So here's some more examples of a roadmap to organizing. Note how all those important key documents from the DESE websites are hyperlinked right there. We've got this teacher's quizzes. If they had specific units, you hyperlink it there. I'll show you a few more examples. MOLE blocks are a huge thing. If your social studies and science teachers haven't been diving into those, this is an example how a specific teacher looked at those blocks. They're using HMH, so they hyperlinked that resource in here, but then here's specific blocks they want to go back and use. So these are just examples of how you can really make your guaranteed and viable curriculum more robust with those resources, and you're giving teachers time to organize it into one spot. Again, this district uses Eureka Math. They've got their key documents up here from the state, and they've hyperlinked in those units and any other key documents. So you can really customize this to look however, but we want to create an organized landing page for teachers. And then after you have these pacing guides done, again, your priority standards are really going to lead to how you do your assessments. One thing I always like to show our company, and this has been really helpful for those of you if you haven't done this step, we have an organizational management tool, and how we've expedited it for people is we have this tab where we've already organized all your teacher standards, and we've linked them to proficiency scales so they can just copy and paste them. So just trying to give you some optional ideas if you're looking at this and you're overwhelmed by the idea of, oh man, we need to make this pacing guides, we need to get them together. We do have some things for you that can really expedite it. Just this simple idea of not having teachers type their standards, giving them a template, a process, and having it readily available. We found these templates have really taken off and help people. We can get a K through 12 curriculum realigned in 2 days. You know, it can take up to 45 minutes to 2 hours for a course. ELA being the exception, it takes a bit longer because there's some coaching and thinking about that. But just an idea for you, you know, and if that's something your team has capacity to type all those standards and put it, we also have student scales embedded in ours and the priority standards identified. So an expedited approach as well. So I'm going to leave you with this again for standard clarity. So 1, we want to pace. 2, then when it comes to the nitty gritty of what do those standards look like, sound like, we want to be using state documents. So item specification, MOLE blocks, map released items. And how we've done that is we've made those readily available to you within a tool. But if you don't have this tool, I just want to share that these are the best documents at your fingertips that you could be going to the state website and using to really help teachers look within their resource. Is how they ask this question aligned to what we see on these documents. And again, we've created a tool for teachers where we actually have a proficiency scale on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, we've pulled all of those DESE things in one spot, and we've given people screenshots so they can just see at a glance, here's what your standard really means. So whether you have this tool or not, you can come back and use these things from the state, but after they're paced, we really need to help teachers understand the clarity of those. So let me give you an example. I was working with a first grade team who brought in their assessment over text features, and they felt really good about it. And we actually used my tool, but let's pretend you don't have a Mapbook tool and you could have that team. All right, well, let's pull out all the item specifications we have for text features and compare those item stems to what they had on their assessment. And what they noticed was their entire assessment was identifying text features, but as they dived in to some of these documents, they found it was using text features to find information. So their understanding by glancing at that standard was, oh, just teach text features and the names of them. And so they realized at that moment they needed to, because they were using these documents, oh, I misinterpreted that standard, that it's really text features to find information. So they had to revise their assessment. And then one teacher said, well, I have been teaching forever, and I always thought that's what that standard meant. And I think that's a perfect example of what's happening. We glance at a standard and we think we understand it, but when you dive into these documents, you find, oh, I haven't been teaching to the rigor. And so that same team left and said, well, I guess we can scrap the 3-week unit on teaching text feature names, and we can now get into, we have to just utilize text features to find information. It shifted their assessment, and we always like to recommend assessments so we can backward design instruction from there. But this type of work is very powerful to engage your teams in looking at these documents. How are we currently assessing and teaching it? What does this information tell us it really means, so they can have that cognitive dissonance and ensure that we understand the rigor of where those standards are going. And again, we've tried to fast track that view in our product, because we find one of the most powerful ways is for teachers to see examples of what proficiency really looks like. This idea of sometimes you can still look at an unwrapped standard and not have clarity, but when you look at sample question types, that's really where whether it be the content or how the question is asked, that really brings clarity for teachers. So in conclusion, we believe that clarity of the standards builds confidence in your teachers. So our goal is always to empower people in their content. But in order to do that, we have to give them that clear roadmap, pace, and guide of here's what your standards are, here's what it looks like at a glance and how you're going to tackle it. Step 2, we'll talk about then how we can make high quality assessments aligned to those that we link into that pace and guide. And then step 3 on our series will be then how do we empower students once our teachers are clear? So I hope this gave you a brief introduction of how to approach creating a guaranteed and viable curriculum with your teachers. If you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us or message us on the network, and we'd be happy to help.